Hello and welcome to the forest. Once again I'm reviewing an ancient DSLR, and this time it's one of my favorites, the Fujifilm Finepix S2 Pro from the year 2002. This camera is weird in many ways, mainly because it is half Nikon and half Fujifilm. The front of the camera, or the photo taking part, is well based on a Nikon F80. It has a Nikon F mount, Nikon flashes and everything. If you are used to Nikon DSLRs, this part will be very familiar. The back of the camera is Fujifilm, and this is the processing part of the camera where the digital magic happens. Today this might seem like a strange concept, but at the time it wasn't that strange. After all, the first DSLRs were basically film cameras with digital backs to them. So this is like the next step in evolution, but they have not fully evolved into the modern designs yet. Also, the Nikon D100 is a bit similar. There also the front is based on the Nikon F80. Of course, since the whole camera is made by Nikon, it doesn't come across as weird like the Fujifilm cameras do. But yeah, the other major weird thing about the camera is the sensor. It has a 6 megapixel Super CCD sensor in APS-C format. And what is a Super CCD sensor, you might wonder? Just Fujifilm branding? Well, partly I guess it's also branding, but it does differ from other sensors at the time. The major difference is in the layout of the sensor array. Instead of having the photodiodes in straight lines, they go diagonally. Thanks to this, the camera can output 12 megapixel files, even though the sensor is just 6 megapixels. And it does this with the help of interpolation. If that sounds too good to be true, well, yeah, it kinda is, because at 12 megapixels, the pixel detail is not that good. And it also does produce a lot of artifacts and glitches. So yeah, I would rather consider this a 6 megapixel camera when it comes to resolution. But I do like how it looks on the 12 megapixel files as well. There are plenty of more weird things about this camera. First of all, the batteries, because you have two sets of batteries. On the underside here you have 4 AA batteries, and in the grip you have 2 CR2 batteries. Fortunately, you don't have to use the CR2 batteries. It works fine with just the AA batteries. You cannot use the pop-up flash, for example, but I have not used it, so it's not a big problem for me. And also it's a bit slower without the CR2 batteries, but again, it's not a big issue. It has 3 LCD screens, one on top here, which belongs to the photo taking part of the camera, to the Nikon F80 basically. And on the back there are 2. One smaller, which has the, let's say, processing information like white balance, file size, so on. And lastly, the big screen on the back, which is for viewing photos and entering more advanced menu settings. The screens do seem a bit confusing at first, because you also have, let's say, overlap between the settings. You can find the same settings in many of the screens, but there is a logic to it. It just requires some getting used to. The ISO can be changed the same way as on the Nikon D100. You can turn the mode dial into the ISO function and then change it. Not so convenient, and again, like I said about the Nikon D100, this feels like more of a feature from a film camera, because there you wouldn't change the ISO more than once per roll. On the mode dial there is also a custom settings menu, so you can quickly get into the advanced settings and change them. It's quite convenient, I like it. Another small weird thing is the size of the mirror. It has a full 35mm size mirror, even though the sensor is APS-C sized. And I guess this is because they used the Nikon F80 body and, well, didn't change the size of the mirror. The Nikon D100 and D70 are also the same in this regard, so yeah, it's just one thing they hadn't optimized for the APS-C format yet. Otherwise, when it comes to the body design of the camera, it is quite nice. The grip is quite big. I can fit all my fingers quite comfortably, with some extra space even. Yeah, in that regard, it is quite nice, the camera. The speed of the camera, well, it's not super fast or anything, but it's not very slow either. I think it is fast enough for a camera of this age. So yeah, the camera does require a bit getting used to when first trying it out, but yeah, it's not that different after all when you get used to it. In any case, it can also be quite fun to experiment with different cameras, and I've been enjoying using this camera quite a lot. The image quality is quite good at 6 megapixels. If you look more closely on the 12 megapixel files, well, then you can see a lot of artifacts and glitches, and also the detail is not that good. I guess these effects are caused by the interpolation, and also in some files I have seen some bigger glitches. For example, this, I have no idea what is going on here, why this happens, but it does have a diagonal pattern to it, like the same way the sensor is arranged. So yeah, it's quite interesting, I think. The 12 megapixel files are not all that bad though, and they do have an interesting structure to them. And the files from this camera do look different from other contemporary cameras like the Nikon D100 or the Canon 10D. Actually, those two cameras, they have kind of similar output. The colors are very nice from this camera, they are quite vivid and they don't require that much editing straight out of the camera. And if you do need to edit them, they are quite easy to work with also. I especially like the colors on night photos. It has quite a pleasing rendering of artificial lights, and also the imperfections and sometimes high noise levels do add to the night feeling of the photos. So I like this very much as a night photography camera, and I will definitely use it more for that purpose. Dynamic range is, well, good enough, I would say. If you compare it to modern cameras, then it's nothing spectacular really. It does lose the highlights much faster than later cameras. Compared to contemporary cameras, well, I don't really know, haven't done that much intense testing, but it's supposed to be better. The successors to this camera, the S3 and S5, are much better at preserving highlights because they have an extra array of photodiodes specifically for preserving highlights, for example when shooting, let's say, brides. This camera is not that advanced, but yeah, the dynamic range is, well, good enough for, let's say, landscape photos. The auto white balance can be quite unpredictable on this camera sometimes, at least when shooting in winter light. I noticed that it couldn't really get the white balance correctly and it was way off. You can set the white balance manually and use custom white balance modes and so on, but it's a bit of a process and the screen is not that good for judging the colors. So yeah, I'm just shooting RAWs with this file and then that does not become a problem at all. Also, the RAW files are a little bit cleaner than the JPEG files, so if you want to edit more, then the RAW files are definitely better. Do the photos have a film look to them? Well, it depends on how you define a film look, but when it comes to colors, I would say that they are more film-like than on other DSLRs I've used, at least from the same time, which would make sense since Fujifilm was, or actually still is, a film manufacturing company. So I guess they based the color parameters in this camera on their film stocks. Now, that being said, when it comes to dynamic range, then it is not film-like. It does lose the highlights quite easily sometimes. When it comes to the details of the photos, well, you don't have a grain structure. Instead, you have, well, digital artifacts. So also in that way, it is not very film-like. So don't expect this camera to magically produce film photos. It is an early DSLR with quite an experimental image process, and that clearly shows also. That being said, the photos from this camera do have a very unique look to them. And yeah, you could call it the Super CCD look. Would I recommend this camera? Well, first of all, the Fujifilm S Pro series are definitely something special. They are quite different from modern cameras, but still very fun to use. But the S2 is also kind of old, so if you're looking for a fast and responsive camera, this might not be the one. Instead, you should look at the S5 Pro, which is based on the Nikon D200. That one is much more user-friendly and modern. If you're looking for a super fun early DSLR, well, then definitely get this one because it's very fun to use and I do really like the results it produces. There is a small problem though. These cameras are kind of difficult to find nowadays. The price has gone up quite a lot for them, and yeah, so it might not be so easy to actually find a good one in working condition. Well, in any case, I think this is all for this camera for this time. Thank you for watching and see you in my next video. Bye!